It's been a while since my last tier list, and the meta has changed a lot since then. So yeah, it's time for another one. This time, I'm splitting the tier list into two videos. This first one will focus on DPS and their teams, and the one coming later will cover universal supports and sustains. The goal is simple, to help you figure out who's actually worth pulling and building right now without overcomplicating things. Before we get started, there are a couple things to keep in mind for this tier list. Every DPS is ranked in the context of their premium setups, but I'll also show you the replacements for their support alongside of it. Also, to keep things consistent, everything here is evaluated at P0. That said, portrait scaling still matters, especially with most true limited characters having more powerful portraits than standard units, which could affect which team you should focus on your account. For example, Lucy at P5 is effectively a tier 0 character even though her P0 placement sits at tier 1. And with the disclaimers done, let's get started. Starting with a quick look at tier 3. Tier 3 characters are the type that can clear content if you put in the effort. They're not strong by today's standards, but if you're a newer player and you just don't have any meta DPS yet, they can still carry you through the story and help you secure basic rewards from easier contents like Limbo and Lucid Field. That said, these units are very much a last resort option for DPS in the current meta. They work, but they demand more investment and cleaner play compared to higher tiers. Moving on to tier 2. These characters are much more usable than anything in tier 3, but they're still a step below what I'd call truly meta. They're decently strong and consistent, and with the right support, they can comfortably clear most general content. One thing you'll notice right away is that a lot of ultimate-focused characters land here. Thanks to their Euphoria, their combined damage output is actually quite solid. It's not anything game-breaking, but it's more than enough to push through stages reliably. A really unique case here is a Knight. His Euphoria is extremely focused on wave clearing, especially in Lucid Field. As long as he keeps getting his ultimate every turn by killing enemy with it, he can essentially fire it off for free. More importantly, his ultimate goes off before enemies apply their opening buffs, which makes him absurdly good at deleting mobs and general content. There is also a lot of mineral and follow-up characters in tier 2, and a big reason for that is the support availability. For follow-up teams, you have access to Flatterpage and Fatutu, which already gives those units a strong foundation. And for mineral only, you also got Pickle, who does a lot of heavy lifting, providing solid buffs, plus automatic buff removal and counter removal, which can make a huge difference in certain stages. And Calabana recently received her Euphoria, and she's now sitting at roughly the same power level as Jill. Starting with tier 1, this is where we're fully in meta territory. If you're running a DPS from this tier with the proper team, you can brute force about 99% of the game's content. We'll start with Marcus. I know it sounds wild seeing her this high, but with a full incantation rank up team, she's unironically meta. Part of that is simply because planned options are limited right now, but more importantly, this is the first archetype that actually has a complete Euphoria lineups. Because of that, the team's damage jumps in two ways. First, the entire roster now scales directly off incantation rank ups. Their mechanics and multipliers care not just about individual cards, but about how many high-rank incantations the team is generating overall. On top of that, they're far more consistent at ranking up their own cards. Second, the raw numbers are massive. Arx's end-of-the-turn follow-up damage is essentially tripled, her ultimate damage is doubled, and Mercuria's ultimate now hits for roughly 5 times its original damage. Even her skill 1 can break a 1000% multiplier at rank 3. Put together, this pushes the incantation rank up team into tier 1 with slight personal bias of mine because rank 3 incantation is satisfying and we legit don't have other choices for plant. Moving on, we got Azio. First off, his damage skill is extremely high in environments where he can counter consistently, and can do a lot of damage through both the general counter style and the poison counter style. When that condition isn't met, though, his damage drops off noticeably. Good thing is, he also has a third playstyle focused on ultimate, which performing better in fights where enemies attack less often. Overall, he's still pretty good right now, but with Assassination Niche unlikely to have any more development, and him being no longer acquirable now, I'll be dropping his team from future tier list updates. After that, we get into the ultimate team. This might sound strange, but for now, they're staying in tier 1. Damage-wise, the team is very strong if you can execute the rotation properly. The issue is that the rotation itself feels clunky. You're juggling AP from Moldir, setting up Recoletta's passive for her versatile card, and you also have to make sure you hit 10 Moxies on Recoletta each round, so the double ultimate might effect is active. That said, this team's position could change quickly. Igor is very likely an ultimate-focused character based on the new endgame mode effects, and he could smooth out a lot of these issues, either by passively funneling Moxie, or by taking over as the DPS and let Recoletta shift into more of a support role. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Next up is Euphoria Anjonala. Her Euphoria brings her right back into relevance. After her first ultimate, her skills deal roughly 4 times their original damage, with additional buffs based on her contracted allies. Those buffs stack even further when follow-ups trigger, which gives her surprisingly strong scaling. She'll show up again later in this tier list as a sub DPS, but here she earns her spot as a main carry. And last, we have Lucy. Post-Euphoria, she's become a very powerful DPS, and her Universal Afflatus advantage is still extremely valuable. The main limitation right now is competition in the Dynamo niche, where Karen is close to mandatory for all the Dynamo DPSs. And yes, Ulrich is also here. At this point, most people have already seen what he can do when he's played as the team's main DPS. Now for tier 0.5, we've got 2 teams. The first one is Impromptu. This team doesn't actually have a traditional main DPS. Instead, every character in the archetype functions as a support, and the damage comes from how well they enable the Impromptu mechanic itself. That said, there is a clear priority order within the team. Kiparina is the core piece and the top priority, followed by Aleph and Barcarola. The final slot is more flexible and is usually filled by one of the Euphoria characters, depending on what kind of utility you want. In most cases, Voyager is the best overall option. She provides both strong AoE and precise sniping for impromptu attacks, though her rotation is a bit stricter compared to the others. If you're in a fight where mobs doesn't really matter and you just want to delete the boss, Regulus is a great pick. Her rotation is much simpler and she excels at focused single target damage. And then there's NN Lee. Yes, NN Lee actually has an impromptu Euphoria now, and it's surprisingly good. She shines in mob-heavy stages thanks to her new passive, and because of how much incantation rank up she generates, she can now spam her stun attack far more consistently than before. The other entry in tier 0.5 is Corvus, and she's honestly one of the hardest characters to place on this list. The reason is simple. Her damage scales hard with time. Every rotation makes her stronger, all the way up to around turn 20. Early on, she looks pretty unimpressive. In fact, during her first rotation, her damage is actually below average, but as the fight drags on, that completely flips. By around turn 12, she starts out-damaging basically every other character in the game, even though she's strictly single target. That single target focus, combined with the long ramp-up, heavily limits where she's actually good. One of the best places to use her is Main's Bulletin, especially the updated version, as you can no longer prep a big burst until the final turns. Outside of those scenarios though, she's just okay. You can play her, but she's not something I'd generally recommend unless the fight specifically favors long, uninterrupted ramping. One more important thing to note about raids is that in raid content, Flutter Page is usually the better option. Raid bosses tend to stack a lot of damage reduction over time, which makes Flutter Page's damage bonus far more valuable than Broom simply doing raw damage herself. And finally, we're at Tier 0, the apex of the game right now. We'll start with the classic, the Nautica Bloodtooth team. With the release of Robuska, this team's damage has been pushed to a completely new level. Yes, her raw damage is slightly lower than the newest top DPS, but what she trades for that is comfort. Most of the important spells only need to be used once every 3 turns to maintain full damage, which makes the team easy to pilot even in longer fights. The main downside of this team are burn and control, but you can kind of solve this by giving up some damage and use Fatutu instead of Robuska. Now, the other 2 Tier 0 teams both come from the upcoming True Limited patch. First up is Beryl, who introduces the new Lingering Glow archetype. Mechanically, it's similar to Blood Tithe, but instead of stacking through HP loss, you build it through applying burn, and also a cooler burn called Halo, sourced directly from Beryl. When Beryl first released, she was only okay sitting somewhere around Tier 1 to Tier 0.5, but that changed with patch 3.3 thanks to Marsha. Marsha does 4 critical things at once. She provides strong buffs to Beryl, increases the burn cap, applies additional burn herself, and directly boosts lingering glow generation. All of that combined massively amplifies the team's overall DPS. The end result is a team that doesn't just scale well in multi-target fights, but can also output absurd damage even against a single enemy, pushing Beryl's team straight into Tier 0. And the last team here, which was a surprise to everyone, is Broom. When her kit was first previewed, most people assumed she'd just be a support for Corvus. On paper, that made sense. She could cover Corvus's weak early rotations while helping stack Corvus's damage faster, but in practice, Broom is actually best played as a main DPS. And unironically, she's currently the strongest P0 DPS in the game. In a full Dynamo setup, her damage straight up outpaces everything else thanks to her absurd zap boom attacks. And it gets even crazier. Her damage ceiling climbs even higher when you pair her with Anjonala due to a very specific interaction. Anjonala's Euphoria allows her to generate Moxie whenever allies trigger follow-up attacks. And Calibana's Euphoria was originally designed to enable this by chaining multiple follow-ups after her ultimate, letting Anjo loop her ultimate back-to-back. But for whatever reason, Broom's channeling follow-up still triggers even though Anjo's ultimate is supposed to lock both characters until the next turn. That means this combo can also loop Anjo's ultimate endlessly. Add in Anjo's bonus buffs to her ultimate when bound to Beast and Plant, plus Broom's ultimate extending her own buffs, and this Beast follow-up Dynamo team ends up being the strongest team in the game right now. And that wraps up the current DPS tier list. The support tier list will be coming right after the Corvus guide, so keep an eye out for that. Also, with both characters' next patch being this meta-defining, it's a good idea to save your pulls if you can. And if you do spend, try to make sure you're grabbing the monthly discounted pulls. As stated before, everything here is just my personal take, based on testing these teams across different modes, plus some damage calculations along the way. If you disagree or see things differently, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your take. And as always, this has been Steamed Bun X, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.